Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something really exciting, the absolute ultimate guide to becoming a top-tier academic performer. I mean, we've all seen them, right? Those students who just seemingly ace every single exam, master complex topics without breaking a sweat, and somehow still have a life outside the library. It's so easy to look at them and think, well, they're just naturally gifted. But listen, the science tells us a completely different story. Achieving top-tier academic success, it's not actually about innate genius. No, it's about mastering a very specific blueprint. It's this powerful combination of mindsets, highly controlled environments, and scientifically backed study techniques. And today we're going to learn exactly how you can become that 1% student by building what I like to call the pyramid of success. So let's jump right in.
To build our pyramid of success, we have 5 steps to cover today. 1. The 1% mindset. 2. Deep work and focus. 3. Thinking about your thinking. 4. Active recall and practice. And 5. Mastery through teaching.
All right, starting things off with Section 1, the 1% mindset, building the foundation. Let's start right at the base layer of our pyramid. To become a top student, you first have to realize that the 1% think and operate fundamentally differently than your average student. The foundation of literally everything we're going to talk about today starts right here, in how you view your own abilities and your daily habits. Average students, well, they kind of wait around for a sudden burst of motivation to finally crack open a book, which, let's be honest, usually just leads to stressful last-minute cramming. But the top 1%, they don't rely on motivation at all. They rely on relentless discipline. They get that small, consistent efforts made every single day are infinitely more powerful than trying to cram an entire semester's worth of material into one sleepless night. They take responsibility, they constantly ask, what can I do better? And most importantly, they study even when they absolutely don't feel like it.
Now, this level of discipline actually stems from a core psychological framework established by researcher Carol Dweck. On the left here, you see the fixed mindset. That's the belief that intelligence is just static, and failing at something is permanent proof that you're just not good enough. But top students? They possess the growth mindset on the right. They inherently believe their abilities can actually be developed through effort. They embrace the challenges. When they hit a wall, they don't throw their hands up and say, I can't do this. Instead, they use this magic little word, yet. I can't do this yet. They view that productive struggle as the literal path to mastery.
Okay, so you've adopted the growth mindset, and you've got the discipline to actually sit down at your desk. But let me ask you directly, how do you protect your focus once you actually get there? Because, let's be real, all the discipline in the world isn't going to save you if your phone is buzzing every 30 seconds.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, deep work and focus, controlling your environment.
If you really want to study like the 1%, you have to ruthlessly eliminate the things that are stealing your attention. And that brings us to the second layer of our pyramid, deep work. This is a concept popularized by computer science professor Cal Newport. He defines it as focused, professional effort performed without distraction that pushes your cognitive abilities to their absolute limit. See, when you eliminate those distractions, your brain actually achieves what neuroscientists call neural synchronization. Your neurons are firing in perfect harmony, and your brain even releases dopamine, which literally rewards you for staying on task. It's amazing. This is that magical flow state where your brain is operating at peak efficiency and time just kind of flies by.
So the crucial move here is knowing exactly how to build what we call a focus fortress. It starts with the basics, right? Declutter your desk, put that phone on silent and get it completely out of sight, out of mind. But the real secret weapon here is something called the start signal. Our brains absolutely love routine. By doing the exact same simple action right before you work, like putting on a specific pair of noise-canceling headphones, or maybe just writing the date at the top of your page, you actively train your brain to transition instantly into deep work mode. It wipes out that initial friction and procrastination. You can also use time stacking to group similar tasks together, like knocking out all your emails in one single block, so you aren't constantly draining your mental energy by context switching.
And to execute inside that focus fortress, the 1% use structured sprints. The Pomodoro technique is basically the ultimate weapon to prevent mental burnout. You pick a task, set a timer for 25 minutes, and work with absolute, unbroken concentration. Then you step away for a quick 5-minute break to let your brain recharge. After 4 of these cycles, you take a much longer break. It creates this great sense of urgency while completely protecting your mental stamina for the long haul.
Moving up the pyramid to Section 3, thinking about your thinking, the executive control.
So our environment is completely locked in. Now let's look at the next crucial layer. This is honestly the hidden academic weapon that guides all effective learning. It's what truly separates the good students from the absolute elite. It's called metacognition. Simply put, it's the process of thinking about your own thinking. It's kind of like having an internal executive control center right in your brain. Average students just blindly read the textbook and, hope it sticks. But top students, they constantly monitor and evaluate their own understanding. They have a personalized toolkit of strategies, and they use them to independently plan and check their own progress, all without needing a teacher there to hold their hand.
The researcher Marcel Wieman summarizes true metacognitive skill brilliantly with something called the WWWH rule. Because look, it's not just about knowing a bunch of random study hacks. It's knowing what strategy to do, when, why it's needed for that specific subject, and exactly how to execute it perfectly. It's having the self-awareness to stop and say, actually, rereading isn't working for this chemistry problem. I need to switch to practice testing right now.
Which perfectly cues up Section 4, Active Recall and Practice, the Mechanics of Memory.
Knowing what strategy to deploy brings us right to the top layer of our pyramid. This is where we break out the absolute most scientifically validated mechanics for memory retention. Listen, if you take away just one single thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. We have to starkly contrast two different methods. Over on the left is passive recall, skimming your notes, highlighting paragraphs, rewatching a lecture. It feels incredibly comfortable, right? And it gives you this totally false sense of mastery because you recognize the words on the page. But here's the catch. Recognition is not retrieval. On the right, we have active recall. This is the uncomfortable, productive struggle of forcing your brain to produce answers from memory entirely without looking at your notes. We're talking practice testing, flashcards, or the blurting method where you just write down everything you know on a blank piece of paper.
I absolutely love this metaphor from the source material. Passive recall is basically like polishing a textbook until every single page gleams. I mean, it looks nice, you feel super productive, but you aren't actually going anywhere. Active recall is actually starting the engine and driving the car. Every single time you force your brain to pull an answer from an empty head, you physically strengthen that neural pathway. You are converting fragile familiarity into durable, unshakable memory.
Let's actually anchor this in the science for a second. A staggering 80% of students who make the switch from passive reading to active recall report vastly improved retention. 80%. It is literally the single most effective way to guarantee that the information stays locked in your brain when the actual pressure of the exam hits.
And the tangible payoff here is just huge. Students who utilize active recall score, on average, 20% higher on their exams. But wait, here is the absolute best part. Because active recall immediately exposes what you don't know, you completely stop wasting time reviewing the things you do know. As a result, students actually reduce their total study time by 30%. Better grades in less time. That is the true 1% blueprint.
Now, this active recall naturally builds right into a framework called deliberate practice. As you can see in this framework from the Utah State Board of Education, not all practice is created equal. Just mindlessly repeating 50 math problems isn't going to cut it. Deliberate practice requires real preparation. You have to design specific, challenging learning goals, and it requires proper implementation, seeking out immediate, individualized feedback so you can instantly eliminate mistakes and improve your performance on the very next repetition. You have got to focus on the quality of the effortful reps, not just the sheer quantity.
Psychologist Anders Ericsson actually spent his entire career studying experts, and he found that deliberate practice has a massive effect size of 0.49 in learning metrics. Now, to put that number into perspective, that yields over a year's worth of academic growth for every standard year of learning. It literally accelerates your progress exponentially.
And that brings us to our final step, Section 5, Mastery Through Teaching, the ultimate test.
We have finally reached the absolute pinnacle of our pyramid. You've got the mindset, you've locked in the focus, the metacognition, the active recall, but now, how do you absolutely, without a doubt, prove you've mastered the material? Well, this quote from philosopher Mortimer Adler really hits the nail on the head. He said, "The person who says he knows what he thinks but cannot express it usually does not know what he thinks." See, often, students will hide behind big academic words and complex jargon, but that usually just masks a fundamental lack of real understanding. Basically, if you can't explain it simply, you just don't actually know it yet.
And that is exactly why the 1% use the Feynman technique, named after the brilliant Nobel laureate Richard Feynman. It's a simple 4-stage process. First, grab a blank page and map out everything you know about a concept. Second, and this is where the magic happens, explain it out loud as if you were teaching it to a 12-year-old. Use plain, simple English, absolutely no jargon allowed. Third, whenever you stumble or you find you can't explain a piece simply, boom,
You've just identified a gap in your knowledge. Go straight back to the source, review, and refine your explanation. And finally, test it again and archive it for future spaced repetition. Simplifying the complex really is the absolute gold standard for mastering any material.
So there we have it. We've laid out the entire blueprint of the 1% student. From building a growth mindset and a totally secure focus fortress to mastering metacognition, active recall, and the Feynman technique, it's all right here for you. But remember, knowledge without execution is really just trivia. So I want to leave you with this provocative question. Look at your upcoming week. What is the very first thing you are going to change about your study habits today? Are you finally going to abandon the passive grind of highlighting? Are you going to set up a start signal for your desk? Make a choice, take immediate action on your very next study session, and step right into that top 1%. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.